All right. Hello again, adventurers, and welcome to another exciting episode of D&D Deep Dive, the show where we dive deep into classes, subclasses, and other features of 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons to help you get the most out of your choices. So, today we are going to be looking at some more fantastical races from the multiverse as we continue our look through just kind of the changes that came out with Monsters of the Multiverse. Quick reminder, if you do enjoy this content, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon to turn notifications on. All those are super important. That being said, let's dive into this. So, continuing on from where we left off, we are going to be tackling the Deep Gnome, otherwise known as the Snurf. You know, it's hard enough to say it without a stutter. I believe it's damn it, Sverfneblin. Deep Gnomes. These are actually, I may be wrong about this. I'm going to, before I say the wrong thing, I'm going to actually look at this because I think they actually showed up in the PHP. Nope, they didn't. Gnomes only had forest and rock. Okay. So I was, for some odd reason, I thought the Deep Gnomes showed up in the PHP, but they didn't. They showed up a little bit later in one of those supplements. But anyway, Deep Gnomes and the Duergar, which are gray dwarves, are both versions of gnomes and dwarves, respectively, that are from the Underdark, very similar to the Drow. Are effectively elves from the Underdark. And the idea is living in the Underdark and, you know, spending their entire lives there, because a lot of these races have entire societies in the Underdark, and at least in the Forgotten Realms, going from the Underdark to above ground is actually remarkably difficult. There's only a few places where you can actually go, you can actually cross from above ground into the Underdark, and the Underdark goes really low, so you have to climb up pretty high to get to that point. So, excuse me. Because of that, they grow up very differently from their gnomish cousins from above ground. Now, like I mentioned in my review, one of the things Monsters of the Multiverse effectively does is it gets rid of sub-races. And the way that used to work is you would have your race would give you generally your larger attribute bonus, like your +2 would come from your race, and then your sub-race would give you a +1 to something. And generally your race would also give you maybe 1 or 2 racial features, and then the rest would be covered by your sub-race. Now, they kind of package it all into one. So, what changes about the Deep Gnome? Well, first things first, probably the most interesting, I guess maybe not interesting, I guess the biggest thing mechanics wise that changes first is Deep Gnomes. The basic stuff that we always go through: creature type is humanoid. You're also considered gnome for any prerequisite that or effect that requires to be a gnome. Size is small, so they are small. But in Monsters of the Multiverse, speed is 30 feet. In the player's handbook and every other supplement with gnomes, both gnomes and the dwarves have a walking speed of 25 feet, meant to reflect the fact that they have shorter legs and the things like that. However, even just reducing movement speed by 5 feet can be a pretty big detriment and force you away from a lot of the different choices. Basically, melee classes in general have a harder time when you reduce when you reduce their walking speed, because if they have to do something like if they have to deal with difficult terrain, well, difficult terrain, in order to enter a square of difficult terrain, you have to use twice as much movement as you normally would. So to go from one square to move 5 feet in difficult terrain, you actually have to spend 10 feet of movement, and you have to spend that 10 feet of movement when you enter the square. You can't move 2.5 feet if you're using a battle map with a grid on it. So reducing walking speed just by 5 feet can actually cut off when you're talking about difficult terrain or anything that causes you to not be able to move your full speed. That reduces you by effectively a third of your movement speed, which is a pretty big deal. Monsters of the Multiverse kind of just generalizes everything. For the most part, I think every single creature in Monsters of the Multiverse has a 30-foot walking speed, because it's just... that's how it is for almost every other race. Just 30 feet is kind of your standard walking speed. And it's the same is true for humanoid monsters and things like that. 30 feet is what you kind of expect everything to be. So that's kind of the first thing. After that, they do get dark vision. They get a special kind of dark vision. In the original version, it was actually referred to as superior dark vision. But that does give... that can cause some arguments at the table, specifically with spells like the darkness spell. The darkness spell specifically states that dark vision doesn't work in the darkness spell. You have to have magical to dark vision. Well, calling it superior dark vision did give a little bit of wiggle room for rules lawyers to argue, well, no, it's superior dark vision, so I can actually see it because I'm superior. So yeah, just changing it into, no, this is dark vision. They just call it dark vision, but you can see up to, you have dark vision out to 120 feet. Any other race, or most other races that have dark vision, your standard dark vision is going to be 60 feet. The dark vision spell gives you 60 feet of the dark vision. So, deep gnomes do have that additional length of the dark vision. And that's something that I think a lot of people undervalue. Again, if you're going to be using these racial features at more than just character creation, something really, really useful is if you are in darkness, if you're underground, if it is pitch black out at night or something like that, being able to see 120 feet when the people you're fighting can only see 60 feet is massively useful. Gnomes tend to be traditionally kind of related more towards the magical field. So taking something like the spell sniper feat can be devastating when you have double the dark vision, because the way dark vision works is, for most characters, whatever your dark vision length is, you can see out to that length in pitch blackness, but everything is in shades of gray. Once you get to your limit, there's nothing. It is pitch blackness. You can't see anything. So it doesn't matter if a deep gnome is 65 feet away or 115 feet away. They are effectively invisible to the enemy. So casting spells, shooting ranged attacks, using something like a longbow, which has an incredibly long, even their short range is incredibly long. Using this dark vision and doing everything you can to get into situations where you're going to be in the dark, you can do a lot of stuff. Again, especially if you kind of kite them around, because again, they can't see you. So you can make your attack and then move to a new place, and their best guess is either they have to try and track you by sound, which is remarkably difficult, or they're going to go to where they were shot, and you can literally just kite them around because they will never get close enough to you to be able to see you by accident. Like, even if they can move faster than you, as long as you're smart about where you are going, you can literally just kite them around a battlefield without them being able to do anything. This can be especially useful for rogues. Um, uh, if if your target cannot see you and is not expecting the attack from that particular direction, you get advantage on the attack roll, which is really useful for rogues. Rangers as well can actually get a lot of use out of that. Technically, warlocks too, simply because, again, you can still get advantage without needing to hide or anything because you are literally invisible to them. As long as you keep kind of moving around and varying where you're from, so you can never really predict where they're going to be attacked from. But rangers and warlocks get access to things like the Hunter's Mark or the Hex spell, which gives you additional die of damage, and when you crit, those damage die get increased as well. Excuse me. So, superior dark vision or just 120 feet of dark vision, use it a lot. There's so much you can do with that ability by just playing with ranges and things like that, especially if you are playing an Underdark campaign. You can do a ton with superior dark vision. The next thing is actually a bit of a change. The old version of the old version of the Deep Known. The next thing they had was stone camouflage, which basically just gave them advantage on stealth checks in rocky terrain. However, they did still have some of the gnomish traits like gnome cunning, which gave them advantage on intelligence, wisdom, and charisma saves against magic, which is kind of weird because, yes, intelligence, wisdom, charisma saves are useful, but the really, really bad damaging spells are all constitution and mostly actually did dexterity. So that was kind of a weird thing to do. When we look at the new flavor of Deep Known, the next thing they get is called Gift of the Deep Gnome. They say snurf nef, but I can't say that word, so it's the Deep Gnome. Starting at 3rd level, you can cast disguise self, and then at 5th level, you get non-detection. You can do it without material components, and once you cast either of the spells with that trait, you can't cast them again until you finish a long rest. So they are one and done, and it's actually one either or done. You can also cast these spells using spell slots you have at the appropriate level. Disguise Self being a 1st level, and non-detection being a 3rd level spell. And then Intelligence, Wisdom, Charisma is your spellcasting ability. You choose it when you select the race. So, this actually gives them access to a little bit of magic, which makes sense. And the Disguise Self spell can be very, very useful. We talked about the Changeling before and just being able to kind of copy someone and kind of throw people off. Well, Disguise Self works kind of similar to how the Changeling is, except that it's a spell and therefore is magical, and it's an illusion. So you don't physically change into it, but you cast this illusion over your spells, and that actually changes your clothing, your armor, your weapons, everything. You look exactly like the way you want it to. It takes it lasts for an hour. It's not a concentration spell. So again, that can be very, very useful for a lot of different situations. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of repeating what I mentioned with the Changeling is there are a lot of situations where making yourself look like someone else can be super, super useful. The issue with Disguise Self that Changelings don't have is this is a purely visual change. So your voice doesn't change at all, whereas Changelings can change everything. So remember the limitations of it. Maybe do something like picking up the actor feat, a remarkably underutilized feat. Allows you to mimic other people's voices uncannily, perfectly. as long as you take a little bit of the time to listen to them. So that, combined with the disguise self, can get you out of a lot of situations. A little further, Gnomish Magic Resistance. It's the same thing as the Gnomish Magic Resistance. Again, Intelligence, Wisdom, Charisma saving throws against spells. Advantage on them. And then the last thing is Deep Gnome Camouflage. Again, they use the other word, but it's hard to say. This is another change. Again, the previous version of the Deep Gnome is called Stone Camouflage, and you just had advantage on stealth checks to hide in rocky terrain, which again is one of those things that is so limited that it was almost never used. Because your DM can just never put you in a situation where you're in rocky terrain where you would want to be stealthy. And that might not even be an intentional thing. You know, if you're doing a city-based campaign, there's not going to be a lot of mountains in the middle of cities unless you're, you know, Baldur's Gate. So it's so limited that, you know, people barely, if ever, used it, and you couldn't really build your character around it because there would be so many situations where you wouldn't be able to use it, and if you built your character to rely on that, it would never work. The new version is called Deep Gnome Camouflage, and basically when you make a Dex stealth check, you can make it with advantage. You can use this trait a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. All of them come back at a long rest. So not only does this make it significantly more useful, but it actually adds a limitation on it, because without that limitation, like the previous version of the Deep Gnome, it was just any time you made a stealth check in, specifically stealth check to hide in rocky terrain. So it wasn't even to move silently. It had to be a stealth check to hide in rocky terrain. But you could do that as many times as you wanted. This puts a limitation on it, which is good. And it broadens it. Whenever you make a dexterity stealth check, so any stealth check, could be to be quiet, it could be to actually use the hide action. There's a lot of different things that you will use a stealth check for. So this is significantly more useful. They tie to your proficiency bonus, and it's something that you can use the entire campaign of your character, the entire lifetime of your character. This is going to be useful. You will be making stealth checks. Even if you are a fighter that wears plate mail and has disadvantage on, you know, your stealth checks, you can still use this all the way up to level 20. So again, those are the things that I like about these new versions of these races, is that they actually give you things that are useful from level 1 all the way up to level 20. Moving on. Next up is the Duergar. Again, Duergar are also known as Grey Dwarves, and they're again, they are Underdark dwarves. They're referred to as Grey Dwarves because their skin tends to be shades of gray and things like that. Again, related to the fact that they grow up underground, they probably wouldn't have incredibly varied skin tones, or else they wouldn't be able to recognize it. It would have no advantage for them from an evolutionary standpoint, because they see with dark vision, which is entirely in black and white. So there'd be no benefit to having different skin colors. So again, previous version was a sub-race, so it got half its stuff from the dwarf race, and then half of it from the Duergar. So it's a sub-race. The new one is just a straight-up race. Again, they change it. The original dwarf race, like if you get the dwarven race in the PHB, the walking speed is 30 feet, but their walking speed is not reduced by when they wear heavy armor. And this is something that a lot of people, especially if you've never made, or you've never had to deal with heavy armor limitations, heavy armor has a strength requirement. Some heavy armor has a strength requirement. If you do not meet that strength requirement, your movement speed is reduced, I believe it's by 5 feet. So at dwarves, yes, they had 25 feet of movement speed instead of 30 feet, but they could wear heavy armor without having the strength requirement. Now, 9 times out of 10, if you're wearing heavy armor, it's because you have a high strength and a low dexterity, because a lot of times wearing medium armor will generally give you a better benefit than wearing heavy armor without having to worry about reducing your speed. So it is one of those things that, again, I know a lot of people that are completely unaware that heavy armor reduces your movement speed because they've never built a character that wears heavy armor that didn't have a high strength score. It's just they go hand in hand. So it really, again, it was one of those things that it makes sense from a logical perspective. Yes, dwarves are shorter. They have shorter legs. Therefore, they cannot move as fast. However, it feels like you are penalizing a player for picking a race by going, well, that's how it would work. Excuse me. Well, it's only logical. Yes, I get realism. But again, like I explained before, it's not that big a deal. And there are so many different ways that you can write off the idea that, yeah, they can move just as fast as a human despite having shorter legs. You can do things like, well, they have more fast twitch muscle fiber, so they sprint faster than humans, or they have extra stamina or something like that, so they can just push themselves a little bit harder and be just as fast as humans. Like, there's so many ways that you can get rid of that and not penalize a player mechanically for making a choice to play a cool race. I like dwarves. I think dwarves are really interesting. So yeah, normalizing stuff and getting rid of those speed penalties for small races, I think makes sense. Again, they get dark vision. Again, the old version of it was superior dark vision. And now it's just dark vision out to 120 feet, which again, I don't have a problem with. The next thing I get is actually, I believe, identical to the old one, which is Duergar Magic, which is basically 3rd level they can cast Enlarge Reduce spell on yourself, and then 5th level they can cast the Invisibility spell on themselves, was the old version, and the new version is the same. And again, once you cast either of those spells, can't do it again until you finish a long rest. You can cast the spells using spell slots, and again, Enlarge, Reduce, and Invisibility are both 2nd level spells. And then this is another thing that I found was kind of interesting. The old version, Intelligence was your spellcasting ability for these spells, which is, again, this is how it worked in the old version of races and sub-races. They would tell you what your spellcasting ability was. And it would be generally linked somehow to the race itself. But linking dwarves with intelligence was kind of weird. Because dwarves, the old version, the PHB version, dwarves got a bonus to Constitution, and the old version, the Duergar, they got a bonus to their Strength. So neither of those were related to intelligence. And traditionally, you don't see a ton of dwarven wizards. The caster class that is most associated with dwarves tends to be clerics. And so I always found it kind of interesting, kind of weird that they would put intelligence as a spellcasting ability, because intelligence has nothing to do with the rest of the race. The lore of the race never really pointed to them being intrinsically linked to intelligence or study or any things like that. They were actually enslaved by mind flayers for a long time, and they're very physical creatures. So yeah, tying it to intelligence never really made much sense to me. And like I said, the new one lets you choose intelligence, wisdom, or charisma. So it still is going to link it to one of the 3 spellcasting abilities. You can have a little bit more, for freedom, and that also means for your builds, you can do other things. Now, I don't think either of these spells actually have a. Yeah, I mean, there's nothing in it that requires a saving throw. Technically, enlarge, reduce. If the target is unwilling, it can make a Constitution saving throw, but you can only cast it on yourself with the trait. So you're never going to unwillingly cast something on yourself. And then invisibility has no saving throw. So it really doesn't matter what your spellcasting ability is for these, because there's no attack rolls and there's no saving throws for it. So it's kind of a bunk point anyway. But yeah, this is something I think it would have been cool to just say, yeah, Constitution is your spellcasting ability for this. Because again, Constitution is a huge part of surviving in the Underdark. But again, they've gone away from using non mind based attributes as your spellcasting modifiers, which I think is kind of dumb. I liked Constitution based spellcasting or strength based spellcasting. I think is kind of interesting. Logically, you have to come up with some interesting ways as to how you can cast a spell using strength. But I do know someone in 4th edition that built, I think he was like a druid cleric hybrid, who healed people by smacking them on the head with his staff. Like, no, it was a club. He just had this big, like gnarled piece of a tree. And he'd go over and he'd like, pow! And he'd heal you. And I loved that character. I thought he was super, super cool, and he was super fun to play with. Next, you get Dwarven Resilience, which again was a part of the base Dwarven, where they're just they're harder to poison. This particular one, you have advantage on the saving throws you make to avoid or end the poison condition on yourself, and your resistance to poison damage again lines up. And then this is the other thing that's kind of interesting. The old version of the Duergar didn't have anything else other than they had sunlight sensitivity, which they've kind of taken away. Sunlight sensitivity was another thing that was built into most of the Underdark races, and it just felt like you were kind of punishing people for making role-playing choices, because like Drow, you have your extra dark vision, but you have disadvantage on all attack rolls on when you are in direct sunlight, or anything you are attacking is in direct sunlight. And it was so easy to have to deal with that, and there were so many instances where that would really handicap your character. So I'm glad that they got rid of that. But they added something different that lore-wise makes a ton of sense, which is Psionic Fortitude is in the new version of the Duergar. And you have advantage on saving throws you make to avoid or end the charmed or stunned condition on yourself. And there's a big reason. Again, I mentioned before, lore-wise, in the Forgotten Realms specifically, the Duergar are based in the Underdark, and they were enslaved by Mind Flayers for a large portion of their history. Mind Flayers have an ability to stun targets in a cone, and it hurts really, really bad. It can TPK a party if you guys get bad enough rolls, because the stun condition, I've talked about this before, the stun condition is one of the rarest conditions in 5th edition D&D, because it is designed to be an almost exclusively monk ability. It is designed to be tied to monks. It is one of the things that monks can do that no other class can do, and that is intentional. The very few creatures that can invoke the stun conditioned are therefore meant to be terrifying, and Mind Flayers are terrifying. The stun condition, you become incapacitated, means all attack rolls have advantage against you. You auto-fail strength and dex saves. Like, it's really, really rough. The only thing that is worse than stunned is the paralyzed condition, because that includes auto crits from any melee attacks within 5 feet. Stun doesn't do that, but stunned is incredibly useful. And the stun ability from Mind Flayers lasts for a minute. So that's 10 rounds of combat. Now, you get to save at the end of each one of your turns, but it still means if they stun your entire party, they're going to get, at probably their bare minimum, they will get one turn where they can just do whatever they want to you, and there's nothing you can do about it. A few of you fail and roll poorly a few times, you're really, really bad off. And I have seen situations like that where parties have been TPK'd by it. Like, it's just bad. So, giving Duergar kind of an inborn resistance to both the Charmed and the Stun condition, both things that Mind Flayers use a lot of, not only makes sense from a lore perspective, and I mentioned this before, I strongly believe lore should influence your mechanics. Your mechanics should have a lore reason why they exist. And I mentioned before, the amount of lore that they cut out of Monsters of the Multiverse is really, really, really insulting. And if you look at the lore that they have here, they don't talk anything about oh wait, no, they do mention the Mind Flayers and other aberrations. So they mention the Mind Flayers and everything in the lore here, and then they give them this thing of psionic fortitude. Hey, because historically you've had to deal with this, you just have this kind of inborn ability to resist it a little bit better, and that's super useful. So yeah, that is the Duergar. Moving on, let's see if we can get one more in here. Mostly because this is my favorite race. I fell in love with it in 5th edition. Next race, or in 4th edition, next race is the Eladrin. If you're unaware of what Eladrin is, in the PHB, there are 3 versions of Elf. Again, that's the old subrace thing. You had Elf, and then you had High Elves, Wood Elves, Drow, or Dark Elves. High Elves and Eladrin, a lot of people used to kind of confuse them because they are both effectively from they're racially they're kind of cousins as far as the various elf subraces. The difference being Eladrin come from the Feywild, and all elves technically migrated from the Feywild into the prime material plane, and depending on where they situated themselves, that's how you got the different subraces. High elves kind of stayed within cities and things like that, and put a huge emphasis into studying magic and things like that. Wood elves went into the wilderness and lived in the woods, and that's why they became much more closely associated with natural abilities and nature magic. And then the Drow obviously went into the Underdark and got to deal with that. Eladrin didn't leave the Feywild, and so growing up in the Feywild, they have this intrinsic ability to cast magic even more so than High Elves, who are just naturally good at it. Eladrin have magical blood. They are infused with magic, and it's one of the things that I loved about them in 4th edition. So the Eladrin, there's actually 2 different legacy versions of the Eladrin, because the first instance of the Eladrin showing up was actually in the Dungeon Master's Guide. There was a section where they were explaining how to create new subraces, and they created the Eladrin as an example, because again, in 4th edition, Eladrin were one of the core races. I can't remember if they were in Player's Handbook 1 or 2, but they were one of the core races that 4th edition that you got very, very early on. They were a big part of 4th edition. So, the Eladrin variant is what it's called from the Dungeon Master's Guide, is really, really simple. They gave them an intelligence score 1. They gave them elf weapon training, which was something that was kind of intrinsic to the Eladrin was they were really good with long swords and short swords, and then bows. They were really really good with long swords and short swords. They were known. Blade singing was an exclusively Eladrin combat style that eventually was taught to the other Relf races, but it was a closely guarded secret of the Eladrin. And sword mages were a uniquely Eladrin thing. There was actually two flavors of sword mages in 4E lore. You had the Eladrin sword mages, and then you actually had the Genasi created their own and developed their own style of sword magic, effectively. So those were the two kind of lore versions of sword mages. So swords were a big deal for them. And then they had Phase Step. You could cast the Misty Step spell once using this trait, and you had to take a short or long rest to get it back. That was the variant version. When they actually got and they introduced it in I can't remember which one, if it was Volo's or Mordenkainen's, but they introduced it, and they introduced the seasons. Eladrin, another aspect of Eladrin, before they became a player race, Eladrin were monsters you would fight, and one of the things you could deal with were these things called noble Eladrin, which were Eladrin that were so old and so powerful that they were effectively demigods, and they tended to associate themselves with primal forces, specifically seasons. You had autumn, winter, spring, and summer Eladrin, and there were actually certain Eladrin that just claimed the title of "I am autumn," "I am the season of autumn," in previous lore. So the legacy version of Eladrin was very, very similar to the one that was in the Dungeon Master's Guide, but they changed a couple things. They got rid of intelligence and they turned it into charisma, which seemed kind of weird. But again, the idea that Eladrin being innate spellcasters, I guess, could kind of make sense. And Eladrin sorcerer would kind of make sense because, again, they are infused with magic. They don't need to study it. Magic is everywhere. Arcane magic is everywhere around them. And then they still got the same phase step, but when you reach third level, you could choose an additional effect for your phase step based on a season. And when you with the old version of the Eladrin, when you create the character creation, you choose the you choose your season, and then when you finish a long rest, any Eladrin could change their season. But it's something that happened at the end of a long rest, and it was kind of tied into their personality and their being. Now we move on to the new flavor of Eladrin. The basic stuff: humanoid. You're also considered an elf for any prerequisite or effect that requires you to be an elf, which is kind of interesting because Eladrin have always been considered Fae, but they kind of deal with that in another way. Size medium, speed 30 feet, dark vision 60 feet. These are standard elf traits. And then they got Fae ancestry, which is another kind of standard elf trait. Advantage on saving throws you make to avoid or in the charm condition. And then they go to the Fae step, and this is the largest change. Instead of you can cast the Misty Step spell, you now have an ability. As a bonus action, you can magically teleport up to 30 feet to an unoccupied space you can see. Which technically was how the Legacy one worked. The variant one in the Dungeon Master's Guide actually had you casting the Misty Step spell. But there's a big difference between casting a spell and just having an ability that's magic. And the big difference, again, the old version, once you use this trait, you can't do so until you finish a short or long rest. The new version, you can use this trait a number of times equal to your proficiency bonus. You regain all expended uses when you finish a long rest. So again, if you were getting regular short rests, technically you might be able to use it a little bit more often at lower levels. If you were to get 2 or 3 short rests in a day, you could technically use the legacy version more than the new version until you hit, I think, level 3 is when you start getting your proficiency bonus jumps up to 3. There might be level 4 or 5. I can't remember right now. Anyway, but after that point, it is just a better version. And then again, when you reach 3rd level, you get to choose your season, and some of them have save DCs, and the DC is based on 8 plus proficiency plus intelligence, wisdom, or charisma. Choosing you select this race. So again, one of these spellcasting abilities, and the abilities are really cool. So Autumn, immediately after you use your face step, up to 2 creatures of your choice that you can see within 10 feet of you must succeed on a wisdom save or be charmed by you for 1 minute or until you or your companions deal any damage to the creature. So that one's nice. The charm condition, again, a lot of people misunderstand what charmed means. Excuse me. The base charmed condition is just a charmed creature can attack the charmer or target the charmer with harmful abilities or magical effect, and the charmer has advantage on any ability check to interact socially with the creature. So the charm condition, the fight mechanics is if you charm a creature, it can't attack you, and it can't use it, like it can't cast fireball with you being in there, because that's a really easy way to get it. Well, I'm not attacking you, I'm just casting fireball. Nope. You can't target the charmer with harmful abilities or magical effects. So I guess that still doesn't technically work. But anyway, and then the rest of it is just role playing things where, you know, being able to convince them, basically any charisma check. So that's useful. When you go to winter, when you use your face step, one creature of your choice that you can see within 5 feet of you before you teleport must succeed on wisdom saving throw or be frightened of you until the end of your next turn. We talked about the frightened condition. Very, very useful. Lots of different ways that can be used. Spring, when you use the face step, you can touch one willing creature within 5 feet of you. That creature then teleports instead of you, appeared in an unoccupied space of your choice you can see within 30 feet. So this allows you to teleport someone else. You just got to touch them. And then summer, immediately after you use your face step, each creature of your choice that you can see within 5 feet of you takes fire damage equal to your proficiency bonus. So all of those have uses. Now again, you can change your season. You could change your season after a long rest. So this is something that you have to kind of choose at the beginning of the day. Which one of these do I think is going to be the most useful? But all of these have a lot of different uses. Things like something I mention all the time: teleportation breaks grapple effects. So if you're grappled or restrained or something like that, unless the ability specifically says you cannot do this when you are grappled, it will break grapple effects. One of my favorite examples of this, I was playing an adventure. It was an Adventurers League adventure. I was playing my Shadow Monk. We were in a sewer. One of the things I liked about playing my Shadow Monk is Shadow Monks get the ability to cast the Dark Vision spell using Ki. You get all your Ki back on a short rest, but Dark Vision lasts for 8 hours and is not a concentration spell. So if we were in any adventure where we were going somewhere dark, if anyone in the party didn't have Dark Vision, I would just go, okay, come over here. I do my ninja things. I touch them. They'd have Dark Vision. We would take an hour rest before we would start the adventure. Then I would be at full key points and the entire party would have Dark Vision. So we were in a sewer system. I think in Mulmaster. I think this was in season 2. And when we're in there, we found an Utyug. Utyugs are really, really, really disgusting creatures that live off of and live in garbage. And they have these weird, like, tentacles with teeth on them. They look like large tongues that have like shark teeth sticking out of them. They're really creepy. But what happens is when an Utyug hits you, it auto grapples. And so we're doing this fight, and we're in pitch blackness, but the Utyug can see, and we can all see, so no one's rolling with disadvantage or anything like that. But the dungeon master goes, "Oh, you got hit by the Utyug," because I'd gone in and I was doing my punch thing because I was a monk. And he goes, "Oh, and you're grappled." And I said, "It doesn't matter." And he just looks at me and goes, "What?" I said, I'll explain later." He's like, "Okay." And he was kind of upset about it for a little bit. He's like, "What do you mean it doesn't matter? I'm the dungeon master. I told you it matters." Comes to my turn. I go, "Okay." I shadow step to the other side of him, and I'm no longer grappled. And the bad thing about the Utyug, I think they also restrained you when they grappled you, and there was some other bad stuff that happened when you were grappled. But I was effectively immune to grapples because I could shadow step as a bonus action anytime I was in dim light or darkness, and there were no lights anywhere around us. We were fighting entirely with, like, everyone was using dark vision. So anytime I got grappled, I would just shadow step out of it. So phase step has effectively that same ability. And so using it with something like the spring one, not only are you immune to grapples, but if you can get up to someone who is grappled and touch them, they can be immune to it because they can teleport away. And it just expands significantly the various things that you can do. It means that combat can be much more three-dimensional. Teleportation in general is just fun. And the fact that the new version of the Eladrin can now use it more than just once and then has to pray that they can get a short rest somewhere, I like that. It means that, again, phase step is always useful. And because it's not a spell, it can't be counterspelled. That's, I guess, the big thing. Anything that prevents spell casting or things like that. Like, another thing, technically you can't use Misty Step if you are silenced, or if you're unable to speak. This is just, as a bonus action, you can magically teleport up to 30 feet. There's no verbal components. There's no somatic components. It is just, you get to teleport. And that is a huge, huge deal. That's a very, very big difference between having the ability to cast a spell that causes you to teleport and just an innate ability to teleport. So, yeah, I love Eladrin. They're super, super fun. Now that they have a new version of the Eladrin that I actually like, I will probably go back to making 1.5 billion Eladrin because they're just fun. Anyway, let me drink real quick. So, final thoughts. Again, new flavor of both Deep Gnomes and Duergar. 120 feet of dark vision. Use your range to your advantage, especially if you can get into a situation where you can be in pitch black darkness. If you're doing an Underdark campaign or something like that, that is so, so useful. For the Deep Gnome specifically, disguise self, there's a ton of different ways that can be super useful. And then your new camouflage ability means, again, if you want to be an armored Deep Gnome, and you're wearing something that will give you disadvantage on your stealth checks, well, now you can just cancel out that disadvantage and be fine. Or if you want to be a gnome rogue or something like that, or a gnome shadow monk, that's always fun. You can get really, really good checks because you can just give yourself advantage whenever you want for stealth. For the Duergar, again, the thing, again, the dark vision is really good. Enlarge Reduce is really useful. Invisibility is really useful. That Psionic Fortitude is kind of a unique ability, especially if you have a jerk DM like me that every so often likes to throw monks at their party just to mess with them. Psionic Fortitude is really, really useful for that. And then finally, Eladrin Rock. Eladrin have always been super awesome. Eladrin are one of my favorite races, and they fixed Phase Step, so it's actually fun. In 4th edition, Phase Step was an encounter power, so every combat you could Phase Step. Basically, you just needed to take about a 5-minute rest, and you would get any encounter power back. So, yeah. Eladrin in 4th edition were just teleporting all the time. They would teleport because they didn't feel like walking. And now you can kind of do that again, and I like that. I think it's cool. I'm a huge fan of that. Anyway, that is going to be all for me today. As always, again, like, subscribe, turn notifications on in the comments down below. What? How much do you love Eladrin? I know I talked about two other races in this. I'm just gonna. How much do you love Eladrin? They're my favorite race. I really really like Eladrin. They're super super fun. So in the comments below, tell me how much you like Eladrin. Anyway, again, it's all for me today. I'll see you guys in the next time. All right. Bye bye.